Good evening, everyone, and welcome to 30 minutes of Torah study for the Torah portion of Noach. So this week is the timing of the Torah portion is incredible. This is a comment that I want to share with you that you may have already seen, but if not, I want to show you a letter to the editor from the Wall Street Journal. A fortuitous Torah portion. Regarding Daniel Pipes' call for Hamas's destruction, Israel needs to destroy Hamas op-ed October 9th, this next Saturday in Jewish synagogues around the world, the regular yearly Bible reading for the day will be the familiar story of Noah and the flood. It includes a strikingly timely passage. In Hebrew, God tells Noah, the earth is filled with Hamas, meaning violence or lawlessness, and I am about to destroy them from the earth. So really incredible how the Torah portion coincides with this idea. However, the term Hamas is used in multiple places throughout the Torah, and I just want to show you one more before we begin the class that comes from the book of Isaiah. It says, Lo yishma oid Hamas bartzecha. The cry, violence, that's what Hamas means, shall no more be heard in your land. Right? So, God willing, we do what we have to do, Torah mitzvahs on our part. The IDF will do what they have to do, going into Gaza, taking out the terrorists. God will do what he has to do, which is Lo yishma oid Hamas bartzecha, the cry violence, the cry Hamas, shall no more be heard in your land. All right, let's go to this week's Torah portion. It is the year 1656 since the world was created. The world is corrupt. God looks down at what is created and he said, this was not the plan. This was not what I wanted this to look like. We have to start again. There is one family. There is one man who is righteous. And God chooses him. And he says, Noach, I want you to build an ark. And you're going to take some animals, some kosher animals, some non-animals. They're going to come into the ark. I'm going to bring a flood. I'm going to wipe out the earth. And we're going to begin fresh with you. So he gives Noach the command to start building the ark and bring the animals. Noach does it. He does everything what God wants, everything that God has asked of him, he does. The rain starts falling. The earth starts flooding. A year goes by. Everything on the earth is wiped out. Now there is a whole new world, and Noach emerges from the ark with his family, with the animals. Again, it's a whole new world. Can you imagine how special Noach must have been? How righteous Noach must have been that God chose him. You are going to be the one that all of humanity is going to descend from. That has to be a special quality, a special kind of righteousness. However, if you fast forward in history, like a little more than 1,000 years, we have the Jewish people standing before Mount Sinai. They're about to get the Torah, and they commit the ultimate sin of worshiping the golden calf. God is so frustrated. He is so bothered by this. He's so hurt by it. He says, Moshe, I'm going to annihilate them. I'm going to wipe them out. There will not be one left. And I'm going to start over the entire Jewish people from you. You are going to be the one to be the father, so to speak, of the Jewish people. How does Moshe react? Moshe says, wait a minute. God, you promised Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, their descendants will be as numerous as the stars. You're going to give them the land of Israel. Well, what happened to this promise? You're going to murder them? You're going to wipe them out? You're going to kill them? So they sinned. Forgive them. That's your job. You're God. Forgive the Jewish people. And if you're not going to forgive the Jewish people, Moshe says, erase me from your book. I don't want to have anything to do with this entire project. This is a very different reaction to Noach. Both of them were told, I'm wiping everyone out, and I'm starting over from you. Noach said, all right, whatever you say, God, I'm ready to go. Moshe says, no way. I don't want to have anything to do with this. Very, very different reaction. Now, before we go to text number 1, which is going to be a beautiful text from the Zohar, I again just want to let everyone know that I am breaking the number 1 rule of PowerPoint. The number 1 rule of PowerPoint is do not put all the text on the slide. Too many words, right? Distracting, no one is interested. However, I have to break the rule because the PowerPoint is the textbook. So there's going to be a lot of text, a lot of reading, because simply we do not each have a textbook. So that is the textbook, but please bear with me as I read these numerous slides. So we go to the Zohar. The Zohar says, let us examine the difference between Moshe and the rest of the world. When God told Moshe, now leave me alone, I will make you into a great nation, Moshe immediately responded, shall I leave the Jews to their fate for my own sake? The Jews will say, I abandoned them like Noach. Because God told Noach that he would rescue him in the ark, along with his family, Noach did not ask God to have mercy and spare the world from being destroyed. This is why it's known as Noach's flood. Moshe said, the people of the world will say that I killed them because God promised he would make me into a great nation. I would rather die than the Jews be annihilated. Moshe beseeched God for mercy for them and for the world. He did not give up until he offered his own life, and then God forgave them. Noach did not do so. He was content with personally being saved, and he abandoned the world. Moshe risked his life for the Jewish people. Rabbi Yehuda said, although Noach was righteous, he wasn't worthy enough for God to spare the entire world on his account. Come and see. Moshe didn't ask in his own merit, but in the merit of the patriarchs. But Noach had nobody on whose merit he could call, like Moshe had. Rabbi Yitzchak said, nevertheless, because God made a covenant with Noach, he should have asked for mercy. He should have brought the offering that he sacrificed after the flood before the flood. Perhaps that would have placated God. So in this text of the Zohar, we see that Moshe is praised for the way that he reacted with self-sacrifice on behalf of the Jewish people and saved them all, while Noach is criticized, but he's also defended. Rabbeinu Yitzchak is critical, right? Rabbi Yitzchak says he didn't even try. He didn't even make any effort. He didn't offer a sacrifice, didn't offer a plea, nothing. Noach is criticized. However, Rabbi Yehuda is very positive. Rabbi Yehuda says Noach was a fabulous guy. What could he possibly have done? There is absolutely zero that Noach could have done to save the world. Moshe was able to rely on Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and the promise that God made them. There was no such promise to Noach. There was no such promise that Noach could rely on. Noach could not say, oh, but God, you made a promise to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They weren't even born yet. So we see that Rabbi Yitzchak is critical and Rabbi Yehuda is positive. Now, why? When there's an opportunity to criticize or there's an opportunity to be positive, what should a person do? Should you criticize or should you compliment? Rabbi Yitzchak is critical and Rabbi Yehuda is very positive. The Rebbe's father gives an explanation as to why. The Rebbe's father taught that the reason that Rabbi Yitzchak was critical is because it was his nature to be critical. What do I mean by his nature? Every person has a soul. Every soul has a particular character trait. The sole character trait of Rabbeinu Yitzchak was gvura, to be judgmental, to be disciplined, to be critical. So therefore, Rabbi Yitzchak looks at the situation and he's critical of Noach. However, Rabbi Yehuda, his character, which came from his soul, was chesed, kindness. Naturally, Yehuda looked at the world with a forgiving eye, a loving eye, an eye of kindness. So therefore, when he saw Noach, he rushed to defend him and he rushed to be positive. And I think we all can relate to it that each and every one of us has a nature, right? We have a particular lens, we have a particular perspective that's natural to us, which is how we look at the world. Some people a little bit more critical, some people a little bit more forgiving. It's human nature. Where does that human nature come from? It comes from our soul. That's what our soul is all about. The Rebbe shared this teaching of his father, but he was not satisfied with it. He was not completely happy with it. He says, why? Because there's a principle in the Torah. It's a straight out black and white Mishnah that says you must judge everyone favorably. Dan Adam Lakapskos. This is a rule. This is a law. You must judge everyone favorably. If there is a rule that you have to judge everyone favorably, how could Rabbeinu Yitzchak be critical? You're going to answer it's his nature. The whole point of the Torah is that we overcome our nature. We become better than our nature to do the right thing and to choose the right thing. So how come Rabbeinu Yitzchak did not judge Noach favorably? We go to the Gemara. The Gemara comments very importantly how careful we have to be in our speech to be positive. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, never let a derogatory word come out of your mouth, because the verse used 8 extra letters to avoid saying something unclean, as it says, from the pure animals and from the animals that are not pure. The Rebbe quotes this Gemara here, never let a derogatory word come in your mouth. Why is Rabbeinu Yitzchak being critical? Why is Rabbi Yitzchak critical? Don't let derogatory things come out of your mouth. When the Torah has to talk about an animal that's not kosher, it doesn't describe it as something that is impure. It adds extra letters to say einenu tahira. It's an animal that's not pure. Why? Because a person should always speak positively and beautifully. The Rebbe writes, if the Torah is careful not to write a negative word about an animal, how much more so should this apply to Noach, who is a righteous man? How then can it be that Rabbi Yitzchak interprets him in a negative light? The Torah itself calls him a righteous man. The Torah is a principle. You only judge people favorably. So how could Rabbi Yitzchak interpret this in a negative light? It seems to go against the Torah itself, and not just the Torah itself, the values of the Torah. So the values of Torah and the words of the Torah. Now the Rebbe points out that Rabbi Yitzchak is not the only person to be critical of Noach. Rashi is also critical of Noach. What does Rashi write? He says, on the phrase, Noach was a righteous man in his generation, we also need to understand Rashi's commentary on the words, perfect in his generations. Rashi comments, some of our sages interpret the specification in his generation positively, arguing that had Noach lived in a righteous era, he would have been even more righteous. Other sages interpret this specification negatively, arguing that Noach was only righteous relative to his generation, but had he lived in the generation of Abraham, he wouldn't have been considered great at all. So here we have another scenario where you have an opportunity to criticize or to compliment. What does Rashi do? He brings both approaches. Noach was the most righteous, therefore God saved the world, but then there's a criticism. He was only righteous in that time and in that era. In an era of Hamas, right? In an era of violence, in an era of lawlessness, Noach was righteous. But in a generation of kindness like Abraham, Noach would have been nobody. Why criticize? The Torah says judge everyone favorably. The Torah calls him the most righteous person. Why be critical? So the Rebbe explained that yes, there is a general principle that we should always be positive, right? That's true. A person should speak positively. However, there's an exception to the rule. The exception to the rule is, when should you be critical? When there is a lesson that you could learn from the experience. If you're going to learn something, if you're going to gain something through that criticism, then we must be critical because we absolutely have to learn. Considering that it's possible, okay, all right. This principle can explain our case. If there is something negative about Noach's conduct, it can't be covered up in order to focus solely on the positive. Relating it has practical importance. To caution us not to take an example from such conduct, there's no choice but to point out the negative aspect in order to teach us not to emulate it. Now, what does the Rebbe say? Why are we criticizing Noach, even though it goes against the rule about judging people favorably? Because there's something that we can learn from it. Because of the fact that something that we can learn from it, therefore we're going to go with the criticism. However, I want to stop right there for a second. How is this fair to Noach? The Torah itself calls him the righteous person who walked with God, who God chose him to be the person who the rest of the world defends from. The Torah calls him righteous. How could we then criticize him in order that we could learn a lesson from him? The answer to this question is something I guarantee you never heard before. Mitchell, I hope you're listening carefully, because I guarantee you never heard this idea before. The Rebbe says, Noach wants to be criticized. He cherishes the criticism. He learns Rashi's comments that only in that generation was he righteous, but he would not be righteous in Avraham's generation. And he is absolutely excited about it. He hears the criticism of Rabbi Yitzchak, but Rabbi Yitzchak says he didn't do anything. Right? He didn't even plead. He didn't even ask. He didn't ask an offering. He wants to hear the criticism. Why does he want to hear the criticism? Because for Noach, the criticism is part of the tshuva process, which ultimately is able to rectify him. Because the criticism is good because people can learn from it. Look how the Rebbe writes it. What was the negative aspect of Noach's conduct? The Zohar notes the difference between Noach and Moshe. Moshe prayed to God for mercy, for sinners, and they were saved. Noach, by contrast, did not pray for the sinners of his generation, and that is why the flood is known by his name, Noach's flood. Ultimately, Noach wants us to interpret his conduct negatively and state that he didn't act properly by failing to pray on behalf of his fellow people, because this rectifies his error. Now, this is a profoundly deep and beautiful idea here. A normal person, or I would say a regular person, does not like criticism, is frustrated by criticism, would be insulted by criticism, especially if it's in a public format, the Torah reading, which is going to be read in shul, but not Noach, because he was not a selfish person. He was not an egotistical person. What did he deeply desire? To do that which is what Hashem wants. So in the Torah portion, if you're going to be able to criticize him, view him negatively, the result being we learn a lesson, how to be better, how to serve Hashem better. Noach is the most excited person in the world. He's not worried about his own criticism. What's he worried about? We have a lesson how to be better. Noach learns about how Moshe pleaded and begged on behalf of the Jewish people. Moshe sacrificed himself for the Jewish people. Noach says, wow, that is amazing. I wish I could have done that. I wish I could have been that. Noach loved the criticism. Why? Because he desires to grow as well. So therefore, when Rabbi Yitzchak and Rashi brings the criticism, it's not a violation of judging people favorably. Exactly the opposite. The criticism there is an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to be a better person because there's no ego involved. That's the key. You want to criticize? If your ego is involved, that's dangerous. That's bad. The Torah says no, judge people favorably. However, if we're talking about a learning experience, an opportunity to grow, then the criticism is going to be well received. It's going to be accepted. It's appropriate. And the result is going to be unbelievable growth. So this is one of the lessons that we learn from this, and the Rebbe adds another lesson. We must know that regardless of how advanced our divine service is, we can never be satisfied with our current state. We must constantly strive for more, knowing that our current state is derogatory relative to the higher level that stands beyond. Awareness of this fault will inspire us to overcome it and reach the higher level. But if we think only of the praiseworthiness of our current level, we will get stuck on it, resting on a level that is derogatory relative to the level beyond it. The Rebbe says, do not be comfortable where you are. A person should always strive to go out of your comfort zone, to do more, and to be better. And we learned this lesson from Noach. Noach was criticized. He didn't do all that he could. But what's his attitude toward it? That is phenomenal. Noach learns from it. He wants us to learn from it. And that is what is called constructive criticism. No ego involved. How can I learn to be better? Don't be satisfied with where you are. And we're going to conclude the class with the phenomenal mini film of the Rebbe, just like we did in last week's class. But this one is going to be on the theme of never being satisfied. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so I can pull up the appropriate screen on my computer. Hold on just a second. All right. There we go. We're going to, hold on a second. I got to press pause. Okay.
All the wonderful work you do.
I'm not satisfied that only continuing. It must be in the attempt to increase.
Well, we'll be satisfied if you continue.
No, I'm not satisfied. Not only about me, but not about you also. Every living thing must grow.
My father came to be the Rav of the largest shul in Johannesburg. There was a stage when my father was being asked to leave South Africa because he was very outspoken politically. He stood very strongly against apartheid. So there finally came a time when they were throwing him out. They weren't renewing the residence permit or whatever, and that's it, he must leave. I wrote a letter to the Rebbe saying, now my father's going to want to go on Aliyah. Could you please say yes? Because we want to go on Aliyah. I had this image of being able to have a much more relaxed life. The Rebbe said no. And he explained to me in a 2-page letter to a 13-year-old explaining, besides the amazing work that my father had done, he still had a lot to achieve. Spoke about he who has 100 desires 200, and he who has 200 will, wants 400.
Die Gemorre darschen ta 5 Kesef le Yisba Kesef. Was mir seht beteva, so der was hat Amone Reize Masai. Und noch der Ruf hat der selber wird haben Masai, wird werden haben Dalit Meis. Was Lichiere Ort erst hat gewollt mehr nicht wie Masai. Hat ihm gegeben Kolta Wosse. Was will schon Davke Dalit Meis? Sagt man auf der Ruf dem Klal, als do Meis vachazita Wosse biyode, wie sagt in Medisch Gehelles, und bekam mit Chemis Beschini Loschen gezahlt.
That phrase is commonly used with a negativity. And here the Rebbe was using it as an incredible motivation to keep on wanting to grow and become who we really are supposed to be.
Nicht bagnugen ist der Miet, was man hat gerecht mit der Tag früher. Oder a viele das, was man gerecht in demselben Tag mit der Show, Kala, Liefnisse, mit der Weile früher. Nur es soll sein, Leisba, Kesse, wie Jadrabe. Mische, Jeschle, Monne, will mehr nicht, wir sollen geben noch ein Monne. Und Mische, Jeschle, Masai, will wir sollen geben nicht noch ein Monne, nur wir sollen geben, darf die Masai.
Rabbi, I heard a film for the first time today.
I hope it will be a good beginning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I lit candles for the first time last week.
Please finish. It's a good beginning and we go from strength to strength. Der Mietgufe, was versteht mehrer in jeker Hatero mitzvei seho, wer bemeche der Rossen letero mitzvei seho, echet agresserer und echet atifer.
Baruch Hashem, sie wächst in Menschkeit, sie durch eine schöne Tal und Teure. Und Baruch Hashem, Vater, haben wir sicher mit Moschiach zusammen.
Amen. Also ich weiß von mir, Bechalke ist sehr eine große Sache. Aber wenn du gehst zu Jannen von Tero mitzvei seho, dann kann man sein Harisot.
I came into the Rebbe once and I handed him my note. The Rebbe looked at me with a smile. And he said, what should I tell you? He said to me in Yiddish, what should I tell you? Ich bin zufrieden. I'm happy. And naturally, I felt very good, put a smile on my face. Rebbe said he's happy. I thought that I was doing so well in my shlichus, and thank God it was going well. And then he went forward and he said, wie kommt es, how is it possible that a young man should be happy in terms of what he's achieved? He who has 100 portions wants 200 portions. There always has to be greater ambition.
Sie haben verloren, sie geben euch hunderte Menschen auf Essen, jede Schabbat in Jonten.
Ihr gießt sehr viel Schwachen. Seit mäßig etwas was, als ich noch, dass ich noch mehr.
Ja.
Und ich kann sein, bei genug
Okay.
My father had told Rabbi Chodakov at one point that he hopes and expects the school to have 500 children. And the Rebbe writes back to my father, I'm happy to hear that you now see that the expectation of 500 can be easily attainable, and now you're setting your sights for more. To the Rebbe, the fact that you reached this milestone showed you that the next milestone, which a day or two or a month or two ago you would never even think of, is clearly within your reach to attain.
Ik vind alles wat ik gemeenig zeg, als de helft van het vlieg staan.
En afgelopen een melding was voor die was vermerkbaar. Niet dat was vermerkbaar, en dat gaat tellen. Was het dan niet dat cijfertje met tellen? Dat cijfer gaat schillen met Naslier gaat zonnen. Dat is Naslier zeggen, we maken hem niet schulden. Want je gaat het niet verlopen naar mijn blogje.
Ich hab getan, meine ich hab
Ich kann im Stand getan noch. Nicht so viel mit der Zilde. Wir bauen mit der Zilde, das immer die Konton noch. Als war jede verbunden mit dem Nebischen, wo der Nebischter sich ablie gewohnt, ist beschaß, wir verbinden sich mit dem Nebischen, wer bei jedem Nege der Linie von Belie gewohnt.
En ik wil maar zeggen naches.
Ich will nachher von euch, ich top von euch.
Amen.
Wir sind Tonnenberg. Ja, wie viel wir werden Tonnen, ich muss dann warten auf den Nesen. Ich wechsle mit der zu meinem Zimmer zusammen. Das ist schon geworden, steht auf Schaß und Rotamone, wie man es immer sieht.
On the one hand, the Rebbe was deeply appreciative of what was done and all the good that's done. But at the same time, the Rebbe made sure that we didn't rest on our laurels, we didn't sit back and use the successes of yesterday as, well, we've done wonderful things and now it's time to relax and take it easy.
Was ist der Mensch, der soll nicht mit Ärzte, aber hier mit Vaccine kommen hat ja. אני רגיל לעשות ברכות. ברכות שלי במאלי שלי יסמר בחלקי ובהישגים בדת. אנחנו נשתדל ברכס בחיים ובחוי ומתייחסים כל ברית הנכונה. Lebendigen Saat und gebraut bei lebendigen Menschen und gebraut bei ihnen, was vielfach lebt.
Right. Thoughts, feelings, comments, questions? Otherwise, next week, same place, 7:30, 30 minutes of Torah study in the shul Zoom. Any feedback?
I enjoyed the film. It was a good film.